My name is Michelle, and I'll never forget the night everything changed. I came home from my hospital shift expecting an empty apartment. My 8-year-old daughter Laurel should have been at my parents' annual holiday gathering. Instead, I found her sitting alone in our dark kitchen. The moment I opened the door, something felt wrong. Her little sneakers sat perfectly aligned by the entrance. Her winter jacket hung on its usual hook. The canvas bag filled with handcrafted presents she'd spent weeks making lay untouched beside them, every tag still attached exactly as she'd carried them out that morning. Laurel sat hunched at the kitchen table, wearing the same purple sweater and jeans I'd helped her pick out. She wasn't crying or making noise. She just looked diminished, like she was trying to disappear into herself. "Laurel," I said, keeping my voice gentle. She looked up immediately. Mum. "Sweetheart, you're supposed to be at Nana and Papa's house." "I know." Her voice was flat, rehearsed. "Why are you here?" I asked, already feeling the anger starting to build in my chest. She paused, choosing her words carefully in that way children do when they've been practicing what to say. "They told me there wasn't space for me." I felt everything inside me go very still. I sat down and pulled her close, holding her tight while fury began spreading through my veins. But I didn't let it show.
"Not yet."
If you've ever been rejected by family who are supposed to love you no matter what, leave a comment below. Tell me I'm not the only one. And make sure you're subscribed because this story gets much darker before there's any light. I held Laurel for several long minutes, feeling her small body pressed against mine. She didn't pull away, just stayed close like she needed the anchor. Finally, I pulled back slightly and brushed her dark hair from her face. "Can you tell me everything that happened?" I asked softly. "Start from the beginning." Laurel nodded, but struggled to find the words at first. She picked at a loose thread on her sleeve, eyes fixed downward. At 8 years old, she wasn't great at organizing events in order, so I had to help her piece it together. "You made it to Nana and Papa's okay?" I prompted.
"Yeah."
I rang the doorbell and Nana answered. Her voice got smaller. She looked really surprised, like maybe she didn't remember I was coming. I kept my face neutral, even though my heart was sinking. What happened next? The house was packed with people. Everyone was inside talking really loud. Nana said I should wait on the porch because the adults were having an important conversation. A knot formed in my stomach. "How long did you wait outside?" "Maybe 10 minutes? Then Tyler came to the door. She hesitated, fingers tightening on that thread. He saw my bag of presents and kicked it a little. Not super hard, but enough that it slid across the porch. He laughed and said my outfit looked cheap, like it didn't match what the fancy people inside were wearing. Tyler, my sister Jennifer's son, 10 years old and already cruel like his mother. I pictured him standing in the warm doorway with golden light behind him, mocking my daughter while she stood in the cold. "Did anyone tell him to stop?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Laurel shook her head. "Papa was right there, but he just said everyone should stop making drama." Then Nana said again that there weren't enough seats. She said it would be better if I came back a different day. Better if she came a different day. Like my child was a package that could be rescheduled for convenience. "What about your presents?" I asked, my voice barely steady. She said it wasn't a good time to take them. Told me to bring the bag home. Laurel's bottom lip trembled. I tried to give Nana the special ornament I made her, but she just looked at it and said, "Maybe another time." I could see it so clearly. Laurel standing on that cold porch, holding out something she'd crafted with love, only to have it rejected. But the worst part? What they made her do next will make your blood boil. Keep watching to find out what happened when an 8-year-old was forced to walk home alone in the freezing darkness. "My phone died while I was there," Laurel continued. "I asked if I could use theirs to call you. Nana shook her head and said it would just make things complicated that you were busy with work anyway."
"Busy. Right."
Too busy to know my daughter was being turned away. Then Papa said I should just walk home. He said the neighborhood was safe, and it wasn't that far. Safe for an adult in daylight, maybe. Not for an 8-year-old girl carrying a bag in December darkness, with wind cutting down from the Washington hills. "How was the walk?" I whispered. Really cold, she said simply. I kept thinking someone would notice I was gone and come get me, but nobody did. I didn't know the way perfectly because we always drive, so I had to stop a few times to figure out which street to take. My hands hurt from carrying the bag. Each word felt like a stone dropping into my chest. I could picture her so clearly, her small figure hurrying along the sidewalk, streetlights casting long shadows, every house glowing warm except the one she'd just left. The fear she must have felt, but too trained to make a fuss about it. When she finished, the kitchen seemed quieter than ever. I pulled her close again, resting my chin on top of her head. You did nothing wrong, I told her firmly. You were kind. You brought gifts. You were polite. The people who should feel terrible are the ones who sent a child out into the cold night. She made a small sound, half relief, half uncertainty, like she wanted to believe me but couldn't quite yet. I stood up, still holding her hand. Come on, let's get you warm. I made hot chocolate the way she loved it, with extra marshmallows floating on top, and whipped cream. We settled on the couch under our softest blanket, her head against my shoulder. She sipped slowly at first, then faster, as the warmth spread through her. For a long time, we didn't talk. I just stroked her hair and let her exist without needing to be anything or do anything. The anger burned steady inside me, but I kept it locked down tight. She didn't need to see rage tonight. She needed to feel safe. Gradually, her eyelids grew heavy. The mug slipped from her fingers onto the coffee table, and she leaned fully into me. I watched the faint tear tracks on her cheeks dry, her face smoothing into sleep. She looked so young, so fragile. And something inside me hardened into absolute resolve. I sat there planning my next move, because what they didn't know is that I had the power to make them regret this night for the rest of their lives. Stay tuned to find out how one quiet phone call changed everything. I stayed on the couch long after Laurel fell asleep, my mind refusing to settle. What happened tonight wasn't sudden cruelty, it was the natural conclusion of patterns that had shaped my entire life. Growing up, my parents always had a favorite. Jennifer, my younger sister, was the star. She was charismatic, always ready with stories that made people laugh. They bragged about her achievements to everyone, displayed her awards like museum pieces.
Me?
I was the quiet one, the one who took longer to warm up to people. When I went through my divorce young after Laurel's father abandoned us without a backward glance, they treated it like a personal embarrassment. They helped once with a small check that barely covered 2 weeks of expenses, then told everyone how incredibly generous they'd been, as if that one gesture meant they'd fulfilled all family obligations forever. Jennifer played her role perfectly. She'd send occasional texts during my hardest months. Thinking of you. Hope things improve. But when I actually needed someone to watch Laurel or help with groceries, she was always too swamped with her own perfect life. It wasn't outright hostility, just strategic absence when it mattered most. She cared enough to look concerned, not enough to actually show up. Then there was Grandpa Henry, my mother's father. He was the one person who never made me feel deficient. After the divorce, when I was scrambling to survive as a single mom working double shifts, he stepped in quietly. Every month, he covered part of the mortgage on my parents' house, the showpiece they loved because it was perfect for holiday entertaining. He'd slip me extra money for Laurel's needs too, never making a production of it. But we'd fought sometimes. He hated how stubbornly independent I became, pushing away help because I didn't want to owe anyone. One particular argument still echoed in my memory. He'd accused me of shutting people out, of punishing myself unnecessarily. You don't have to carry everything alone, he'd said, voice raised in frustration. I'd shot back that depending on family hadn't exactly worked out well for me. We didn't speak for a month after that, but he never stopped the support. Eventually, we reconciled with his gruff apology and my quiet acceptance. He was getting older, now his knees troubling him on stairs, his energy fading. He lived alone in his modest bungalow across town, managing with a cane on difficult days, but still sharp as ever mentally. Laurel adored him. He'd let her help bake cookies, tell her stories about when I was little, always had time for her drawings and endless questions. He'd light up around her in a way that made the rest of the family's indifference even more glaring. What hurt most was remembering why he'd helped with the house in the first place. His reasoning would make what came next hit even harder. Keep watching. So there's room for everyone, Grandpa Henry used to say about funding the house. Family should have space to gather when it's cold outside. He believed that deeply, poured his retirement savings into making it possible. Yet lately, visits to him had dwindled. My parents would call occasionally to check in, then act like that counted as real effort. Jennifer barely mentioned him unless discussing some future inheritance. Sitting in the dim living room, I traced these patterns backward. The favoritism wasn't new, it had always shaped who they thought deserved what. They built their comfortable life partly on Grandpa Henry's generosity, treating it like something earned rather than freely given. And now that same mindset had extended to Laurel, my bright, loving daughter, reduced to an inconvenience because she didn't fit neatly into their perfect evening. The unfairness settled heavy in my chest. He'd given so much to keep everyone connected, only to watch them pull away when he needed them more. Tonight, they'd use the space he'd provided to exclude the one person who still eagerly wanted to be part of it all. I looked down at Laurel, peaceful in sleep, and felt fierce protectiveness surge through me. This wasn't just about one bad night, it was about years of imbalance finally tipping too far. That surge pushed me to my feet. I carried Laurel gently to her bed, tucking the blanket around her before grabbing my phone. It was late, but Grandpa Henry had always been a night owl, and I needed him to hear this, needed Laurel to tell him, if she could manage it. I dialed the video call, settling back on the couch as it rang. He answered quickly, his weathered face appearing on screen with his living room lamp glowing behind him. His eyes crinkled warmly when he saw me. "Michelle," he said, voice gravelly but alert. "Everything okay?" I hesitated, then turned the phone to show Laurel's empty spot beside me, explaining softly that she'd fallen asleep, but I needed to talk. He nodded, waiting patiently as I recounted the evening, the unexpected rejection at my parents' door, the way she'd walked home alone in the dark. Before I finished, Laurel stirred from her bedroom, drawn by his voice through the speaker. She padded out in her socks, rubbing her eyes, and climbed onto the couch beside me. I angled the phone so he could see her fully. "Hi, Grandpa," she mumbled, leaning close to the screen. His expression softened immediately. "Hey, sweetheart. Rough night." She nodded, then said quietly, in one devastating sentence, "I think I did something wrong. That's why they sent me home." The change in him was instant and terrifying. What he said next would set everything in motion. "Don't click away, this is where it gets serious." The warmth drained from Grandpa Henry's face. His brows drew together, jaw tightening in a way I rarely saw. He didn't interrupt or rush to comfort her. He just let those words hang in the air, absorbing their weight. I filled in the details. He asked for how crowded the house was, Tyler's mocking, the suggestion that an 8-year-old walk home alone. He listened without comment at first, eyes fixed on the screen, the lines around them deepening. Finally, he spoke, his tone measured but edged with steel. "I've helped them all these years because I thought that's what family does, keeps a place for everyone, especially the children." He paused, glancing at Laurel again, then back to me. "I cannot accept my great-granddaughter being treated like she doesn't belong in that house." Laurel shifted closer to me but stayed silent, watching him with wide eyes. He addressed me directly. "Take care of her tonight. Make sure she knows none of this is her fault." "I will," I promised. He nodded slowly, the weight of the conversation visible in how he rubbed his jaw. "I need to think this through carefully. We'll talk soon." The call ended with his voice lower than usual, almost gruff. "Sleep well, both of you. Lock the doors." The screen went dark. I set the phone down and pulled Laurel against me, her head on my shoulder. She didn't ask questions, just sighed and closed her eyes, trusting things would improve by morning. I sat holding her, replaying his words. There was no dramatic promise, no immediate threat, just that quiet resolve I knew so well. It was enough to ease some of the tightness in my chest, enough to let me breathe a little deeper. I carried Laurel back to bed, lingering to watch her settle. Whatever came next, at least she had someone else in her corner who saw tonight for exactly what it was. Back in the living room, I turned off the lights and stood by the window, looking out at the empty street. The cold night pressed against the glass, but inside, things felt slightly less suffocating. Morning came with sunlight filtering through the curtains, but my phone stayed silent. I tried reaching Grandpa Henry several times, each unanswered ring tightening the knot in my stomach. He wasn't someone who ignored calls, especially after last night. Worry pushed me to grab my keys earlier than planned. Laurel was finishing cereal when I told her we were checking on him. She didn't question it, just slipped on her shoes and climbed into the car. The drive felt endless, my hands tight on the wheel as worst-case scenarios played out in my head. When we arrived at his house, what we found made my blood run cold. My parents had made a move I never saw coming. Stay with me, this is where everything explodes. Grandpa Henry's small house looked quiet when we pulled up, no lights visible inside, no movement at the windows. I knocked first, then used my spare key when there was no answer. The rooms were tidy, his cane resting in its usual spot near the door, but the house was empty. A neighbor trimming hedges across the street caught my eye as I stepped back outside. "Morning," I said, trying to sound casual despite the rising panic. "Have you seen my grandfather today?" She set down her shears, frowning. "Early this morning, yeah. Your parents came by and picked him up in their SUV. Didn't look like he wanted to go," kept looking back at the house as they drove off. That was all I needed to hear. I thanked her quickly, got Laurel back in the car, and drove straight to my parents' house. The same streets Laurel had walked alone in the freezing dark, but I pushed that thought aside to focus on what lay ahead. Their driveway had only their vehicle when I arrived. I parked and took Laurel's hand as we walked up, her small fingers squeezing mine tightly. I knocked hard, 3 sharp raps that echoed. My mother opened the door just a crack, her expression shifting to guarded the moment she recognized us. "Mom," I said firmly, "where's Grandpa Henry?" She hesitated, then opened the door wider, but stayed blocking the entrance.
He's resting.
"Now isn't a good time. I need to see him. Now." My father appeared behind her, arms crossed defensively. "Michelle, he's fine. We brought him here to keep an eye on him after he seemed upset last night." Upset last night, as if they had any clue what that call had really been about. "He doesn't live here," I replied, keeping my voice level for Laurel's sake. "You can't just take him without his consent." My mother's lips pressed into a thin line. "He's family. We're looking after him. He doesn't need visitors stirring up trouble right now." Laurel shifted closer to me, her grip tightening. I felt her trembling slightly and squeezed back reassuringly. "I'm not leaving until I hear from him directly that he wants to be here," I insisted, stepping forward. My father shook his head. "Not happening. Go home." The refusal hit like a slap. I tried once more, raising my voice just enough to be clear. "Let me talk to him. 5 minutes." "No," my mother cut in sharply. "He's sleeping, and you're causing a scene." Laurel looked up at me, eyes wide with the same fear churning inside me. The standoff stretched, tension thick between us. They weren't budging, and every second they blocked that door fed my certainty that something was very wrong. So I did the one thing they never expected. What happened in the next 10 minutes would crack their perfect world wide open. "You need to see this." I pulled out my phone, thumb hovering over the screen deliberately so they could see exactly what I was doing. My parents exchanged worried glances, realizing too late what was happening. "You're seriously calling the police?" my mother asked, voice laced with disbelief. "Yes," I said calmly. "I'm requesting a welfare check on my grandfather, an elderly man who may have been taken from his home without proper consent." I dialed 911, speaking clearly to the dispatcher. I explained Grandpa Henry's advanced age, his mobility issues, that he was last seen being picked up early this morning by family members who were now refusing to let anyone see him. Possible concern, he wasn't there voluntarily. I gave the address and stayed on the line until they confirmed officers were on their way. My parents stood there, faces tight with frustration and something close to panic. Laurel held my hand tighter, staying quiet but close. The wait felt endless, the cold morning air biting as we stood on that porch they refused to let us cross. The patrol car arrived within minutes. Two officers stepped out and approached with calm professionalism. My parents shifted uncomfortably, my mother smoothing her cardigan, as if this were just a minor misunderstanding. The lead officer asked straightforward questions: who lived here, relation to Grandpa Henry, reason for the call. My father tried to take control. There's no emergency. He's family, resting inside. This is all blown out of proportion. The officer nodded politely, but didn't back down. We still need to speak with him directly to confirm he's okay and here by his own choice. My mother glanced at me with pure fury, then reluctantly stepped aside. The officers entered, and we followed at a distance, Laurel staying pressed against my side. The house smelled of coffee and lingering warmth from last night's party, but the atmosphere felt oppressive now. Grandpa Henry was seated in the back living room, his cane within reach, a blanket over his lap. He looked exhausted, lines deeper around his eyes, but his gaze was clear and sharp when he saw us. One officer crouched to his level, speaking respectfully. "Sir, are you all right? Do you need medical assistance?" He shook his head.
Hai fine physically.
"And are you here because you want to be?" A pause. Grandpa Henry glanced toward my parents standing rigid in the doorway, then back to the officer.
No.
"I'd like to go home." The words were simple, but landed with absolute finality. My mother tried to argue, but what the officers did next shut her down completely. And what my grandfather did after we got him home. That's when the real war began. My mother started to protest immediately.
He's confused.
"He doesn't mean." But the officer raised a hand gently, cutting her off without rudeness. "Ma'am, he seems clear-headed to me. We'll assist him, if that's his wish." They helped him to his feet, steadying him as he gripped his cane. Laurel let go of my hand and moved forward instinctively, taking his other arm. He gave her a small, grateful smile as we all made our way out. My parents watched in stunned silence, no more arguments coming as the officers ensured Grandpa Henry was safely in my car. The drive back to his house was quiet at first. He sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window, while Laurel reached forward from the back to rest her hand on his shoulder. "Thank you," he said eventually, voice rough. "Didn't expect it would come to that." "You don't have to explain," I replied softly. "We're just glad you're safe." We got him settled at home, fresh coffee, his favorite chair by the window. He seemed more himself there, the tension easing from his shoulders. After a while, he looked at me directly. "I already contacted my lawyer this morning before they came. We should go now, while I have the energy and clarity." Laurel and I exchanged glances, but didn't question it. The office wasn't far, a small firm he'd used for decades. The attorney greeted us warmly, leading us to a conference room with wood paneling and neat stacks of files. He spread documents on the table, adjusting his glasses as he addressed Grandpa Henry. "We've discussed updating your will before," he began evenly. "The current version leaves the bulk of your estate to your daughter and her family, with provisions for Jennifer as well. Changing beneficiaries now is straightforward since you're clearly of sound mind, but I have to warn you, disinheriting close family can lead to legal contests after you're gone. They might claim undue influence or question your capacity." Grandpa Henry listened intently, nodding. "I understand the risks. I've thought about this longer than just today." The lawyer turned pages, pointing out specific sections. "We can redirect everything: savings, investments, remaining property interests to Michelle, and establish a trust for Laurel's education and future. It's clean, revocable only by you while you remain capable." I sat quietly, watching as he explained the safeguards: medical affirmation of capacity if needed, multiple witnesses present. Laurel stayed right beside her great-grandfather, her small hand wrapped around his the entire time. She didn't say a word, just watched his face with that serious expression children get when they sense something important happening. He asked clarifying questions about timelines, about protecting Laurel long-term. The attorney answered thoroughly, taking his time, making sure everything was understood. When the moment came, Grandpa Henry took the pen without hesitation, signing where indicated, initialing pages with steady strokes. The lawyer notarized it. Witnesses signed. And just like that, my parents' entire future shattered.
But they didn't know it yet.
The explosion came 3 days later. My phone started buzzing constantly in the days that followed. The first real outburst came from Jennifer. I was folding laundry when her name appeared on the screen. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something made me answer. Michelle. Her voice cracked immediately, thick with tears. What have you done? I stayed silent, waiting. You manipulated him, she continued, words tumbling out between sobs. He's old, he's confused, and you took advantage. How could you turn him against us, after everything this family has been through? I leaned against the counter, keeping my breathing even. Laurel was in the next room drawing, oblivious for now. He wasn't confused, I said calmly. He knew exactly what he wanted. She didn't let me finish. This is about money, isn't it? You've always been jealous. Mom and Dad gave you chances, and you threw them away. Now you're stealing what's supposed to be for all of us, for Tyler's future, for the house, for everything Grandpa worked for. The accusations kept coming, layered with years of resentment. She painted me as the schemer, the one who whispered in a vulnerable old man's ear to secure a bigger inheritance. When she paused for breath, I spoke. You mean the house he paid for while you all enjoyed the space? The same space you decided didn't have room for an 8-year-old on a cold night? She faltered. That was different. It was crowded, things got hectic, and sending her out into the dark alone was your solution?
My tone stayed low, measured.
Letting Tyler mock her clothes while you stood by, refusing to even let her use a phone. It wasn't like that, she insisted, voice rising again. You're blowing it out of proportion to justify this betrayal. It's not betrayal to protect what's right, I said. You've all benefited from his generosity for years, taken it without question. But when it came to treating his great-granddaughter with basic decency, there wasn't room. She started crying harder, switching tactics. Please, talk to him. Fix this. Tyler deserves. No, I cut in gently but firmly. He doesn't get to decide that anymore. The line went quiet except for her ragged breathing. Then my mother's text came through almost simultaneously, a long message full of blame, calling me ungrateful, saying I'd broken her father's heart and destroyed the family. She ended with a threat to fight it legally, to prove Grandpa Henry wasn't in his right mind. I read it once, then set the phone down. Jennifer was still on the line, waiting for a response that would soften things. Instead, I said the only thing left. My daughter learned how to stay silent from this family. Then I hung up. The phone exploded with messages after that. But what I did next? They never saw it coming. This is the moment I took back all my power. The phone buzzed again almost immediately. More texts flooded in. Another call from a number I recognized as my father's. I let them pile up for a moment, reading the escalating anger, watching the shift from tears to outrage. They accused me of isolating him, of poisoning years of relationships for my own gain. They called me vindictive, manipulative, cruel. Each message was a variation of the same theme. I was the villain in their story. I didn't reply to any of it. When the notifications became overwhelming, I blocked Jennifer's number first. Then my mother's. Then my father's. One by one, the connections severed with a few taps.
No dramatic declaration.
No final message explaining myself. Just silence on my end. Laurel wandered and then, holding up a drawing for me to see a picture of her and Grandpa Henry having tea together. I smiled, took it from her, and hung it on the fridge without mentioning the phone. She didn't need to know these details yet. The quiet that followed felt different.
Cleaner.
Like closing a door that had been letting in cold air for too long. No more explanations owed. No more defending choices they'd never understood anyway. Over the next few weeks, Grandpa Henry's health remained stable. We visited him often, Laurel, and I would bring groceries, cook meals together, play cards. He seemed lighter somehow, unburdened. He never mentioned my parents or Jennifer, and neither did I. One afternoon, while Laurel was showing him her schoolwork, he looked at me across the kitchen table. You know they'll keep trying, he said quietly. The lawyer warned me. They might contest everything after I'm gone. Let them try, I replied. We have documentation. Witnesses. Medical records showing you were completely competent. He nodded slowly. I just want to make sure Laurel's taken care of. That's all that matters now. She will be, I promised. We both will be. A few months later, I received a certified letter. My parents' attorney was officially challenging the will, claiming undue influence and questioning Grandpa Henry's mental state at the time of signing. They demanded mediation. I showed the letter to our lawyer, the same one who'd handled the will. He read it carefully, then looked up with a slight smile. This is standard procedure when families feel slighted, but they don't have a case. We documented everything properly. The medical evaluation, the witnesses, your grandfather's clear statements about his reasoning. Unless they have evidence of coercion or proof he wasn't competent, which they don't, this will fail. How long will it take?
I asked.
Could be months. Maybe a year if they're persistent. But I'm confident about the outcome. I wasn't worried anymore, because the truth was finally on my side. But the real question was, would Grandpa Henry live to see this resolved? What happened next will break your heart. The legal battle dragged on, just as our lawyer predicted. My parents filed motion after motion, each one more desperate than the last. They claimed Grandpa Henry had been showing signs of dementia. He hadn't. They suggested I'd isolated him from family. They'd done that themselves. They even tried to argue that Laurel's presence during the will signing was proof of manipulation, as if a child could orchestrate legal fraud. Each claim was systematically dismantled. Medical records showed cognitive assessments from just weeks before the signing, all normal. The lawyer's detailed notes documented every precaution taken. Character witnesses, neighbors, his doctor, longtime friends testified to his sharp mind and independent nature. Through it all, Grandpa Henry remained remarkably calm. Let them waste their money on lawyers, he'd say, with a slight shrug. I know what I did and why I did it, but I could see the toll it took. Not the legal fight itself, but the confirmation that his daughter and granddaughter cared more about money than about him. Sometimes I'd catch him staring out the window with a sad, distant look. Laurel noticed too. She started spending even more time with him, bringing her homework to his house, baking cookies together, reading him her favorite books. She never asked about the family drama. Children have a way of knowing when not to push, but her presence was its own form of healing. One evening in early spring, about 8 months after the will was changed, I got a call from Grandpa Henry's neighbor. He'd fallen in his bathroom. Not seriously, but enough that the neighbor had called an ambulance as a precaution. Laurel and I rushed to the hospital. He was already in a room when we arrived, sitting up in bed looking annoyed at all the fuss. The doctor said it was a minor fall, some bruising, but given his age they wanted to keep him overnight for observation. I'm fine, he insisted when we walked in. Completely unnecessary. But his hands trembled slightly when he reached for the water cup, and I noticed how much thinner he'd become. Over the next few weeks, there were more small incidents. Another fall, forgetting to take his medication. The doctor gently suggested it might be time to consider assisted living or having someone stay with him full-time. I can move in, I offered immediately. Or you can stay with us. He shook his head stubbornly. I'm not leaving my home. So we compromised. I hired a part-time caregiver for the hours I was at work, and Laurel and I spent every evening and weekend at his place. The legal battle was nearly over. A lawyer said we'd likely have a final ruling within weeks. But time was running out in a different way. What happened next changed everything one final time. On a quiet Tuesday morning in May, Grandpa Henry didn't wake up. The caregiver found him peaceful in his bed, no signs of distress. The doctor said his heart had simply stopped. Common at his age, probably painless. Laurel took it hard. She cried for days, clutching the last drawing she'd made for him, the two of them in his garden, surrounded by flowers. I held her through it, my own grief a heavy weight I carried separately, privately. The funeral was small. Just us, a few of his old friends, some neighbors. My parents and Jennifer showed up, standing at the back, faces carefully neutral. They didn't approach us.
Didn't speak.
Just watched from a distance like strangers. After the service, my mother tried to corner me in the parking lot. We should talk, she said stiffly. Put all this behind us. There's nothing to discuss, I replied calmly, guiding Laurel toward our car. He's gone now, my father added, stepping forward. Surely we can settle this as a family. I turned to face them. You stopped being family the night you sent an 8-year-old into the cold alone. Everything that happened after that was just the consequences of your own choices. Jennifer stood behind them, tears streaming down her face, but whether they were for Grandpa Henry or for the inheritance she'd lost, I couldn't tell and didn't care. Please, she whispered, don't do this. I'm not doing anything, I said. I'm just living with the decisions you all made. We drove away, without looking back. 3 weeks later, the court issued its final ruling. The will stood as written. Every claim my parents and Jennifer made was dismissed. The judge's statement was clear. Grandpa Henry had been of sound mind, acting of his own free will, and his reasoning protecting a great-granddaughter who'd been mistreated was both rational and justified. The inheritance transferred to us exactly as he'd intended. The savings, the investments, the small piece of property he still owned. More than enough to secure Laurel's education and our future. But the money was never really the point. Months passed. Laurel started a new school year, made new friends, joined the art club. She still talked about Grandpa Henry, often remembering his stories, his laugh, the way he'd let her crack eggs into the mixing bowl, even though she always got shells in it. One Saturday morning, she came to me with a question. Mom, do you think Nana and Papa miss me? I sat down beside her, choosing my words carefully. I think they probably do, in their own way. Do you miss them? I considered it honestly. I miss who I wish they would be, but I don't miss who they actually were. She nodded, processing this with that serious expression she got when thinking hard about something. I'm glad we have each other, she said finally. Me too, sweetheart. Me too. We never heard from my parents or Jennifer again after that day in the parking lot. No calls, no letters, no attempts at reconciliation. And that was fine. Some doors, once closed, should stay that way. Laurel and I built our own life, our own traditions. We started volunteering at a children's shelter on holidays, making sure no kid ever felt unwanted during what should be family time. We created new rituals, new memories that had nothing to do with people who'd made us feel small. Sometimes I think about that cold night when Laurel walked home alone in the dark. How terrified she must have been. How small and rejected she felt. And then I think about what came after, how one quiet phone call, one signed document, one moment of standing firm changed everything. I didn't yell. I didn't scream. I didn't beg them to see their cruelty. I just protected what mattered, let the consequences unfold naturally, and walked away from people who never deserved us in the first place. And you know what? We've never been happier. If you've ever had to cut toxic family out of your life to protect yourself or your children, you're not alone. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is simply walk away and build something better. Drop a comment if this story resonated with you, and remember you don't owe anyone access to your life just because you share DNA.